What would you do if, after you died, you were shown every past life you had ever lived, and then a voice asked you, who do you want to return as? I died in the cold, but the scariest part wasn't the freezing air. It was the moment I realized I had lived hundreds of lives before and still hadn't learned how to love myself. Have you ever lived without knowing why you exist? Have you ever looked around and wondered why you always feel like a stranger in the very world you walk through every day? My name is Evelyn Grace Harper. I was 27 when it happened, and I thought I was just an ordinary girl living an ordinary life in some ordinary cold corner of Montana. But I wasn't ordinary. I had never been. The truth is, no one is. I was different from the start. I don't know how to explain it exactly, but I always felt like I came from somewhere else, somewhere without forced laughter, without hollow greetings, without parties where people talk about the weather just to avoid talking about real pain. I didn't fit in easily. I was never good at answering the question, what do you want to be when you grow up? Because I didn't want to be anyone. I just wanted to understand why I was born at all. I grew up on a small farm where the wind would whistle through the roof like voices from the past. My mother was the only person on earth who truly understood me. She didn't need to say much. She didn't need to explain. Just a glance, a hug, a warm bowl of soup when I cried in silence. My father wasn't cruel. He just never understood why a little girl could sit for hours quietly watching a squirrel find its way back to its nest. I loved animals, but not in the way people usually say they do. It wasn't because they were cute or cuddly. It was because around them, I didn't have to be anyone. I didn't have to act happy. I didn't have to be strong. I didn't have to be okay. I just had to be. The abandoned, the wounded, the forgotten, I found pieces of myself in their eyes, and I spent my youth trying to save every last one of them. One time, I asked my mother, have you ever felt like you don't belong here? She looked at me and gave a soft, bitter smile. I still feel that way, she said. But sometimes you're sent to a place not because you belong there, but because that place needs you. I lived, or more truthfully, I existed through long, snowy days, through springs that never quite thawed, inside small rooms filled with the scent of vet meds, cat fur, and a stubborn kind of hope. I didn't have many friends, but I had Maple, the fox, Jasper, the little bird with a broken wing, Elijah, a blind dog I'd rescued, and I had my mother. Then one January day, when the sky was white as bone and the wind howled like it was trying to retell a story long forgotten, I heard howling from the woods behind our farm. I knew that sound. It was the cry of a pack of trapped dogs. I didn't think, I just moved. I grabbed a flashlight, a first aid kit, and ran into the blizzard, as if I were the one who'd been left behind. That was the last time I remember feeling cold. Cold to the point where my heart felt like it would shatter, my lungs clamped tight, my thoughts slipping into fog. I lost my footing. I fell. I tumbled down a narrow ravine covered in ice, and I heard the sharp crack as if time itself had fractured. In that moment, I thought, I must be dying. But what I didn't know was that I wasn't about to die. I already had. And what happened next would forever change everything I once believed to be real. Have you ever wondered what happens when your soul leaves your body, but your heart hasn't yet had the chance to say goodbye? I don't know how long it took me to realize I was no longer lying beneath the snow. I don't even know what made me open my eyes, because by then I didn't have eyes to open. Nobody, no arms or legs, no physical pain. But I was still me. My awareness was drifting, not fast, not slow. Everything around me was black, but not the terrifying kind of darkness. It was warm, like a soft blanket wrapped around a soul just waking up from a long-forgotten sleep. I wasn't afraid. The first emotion I felt wasn't fear. It was wonderful. And then, peace. A deep, inexplicable calm. So complete, I almost forgot who I had ever been. I tried to remember. Montana, my mother, Maple, Elijah, the wild dogs, the ice. The memories came back like photographs dropped into water, blurry at first, then gradually clearing. I thought to myself, what's happening to me? And then I heard a sound, not with ears, but with consciousness. A voice neither male nor female, woven from light itself, whispered, "Don't be afraid. You are returning." I didn't understand. Returning where? Who was I? Why did I still exist if my body had died? And then I saw the light. It wasn't the light at the end of a tunnel like people always talk about. It wasn't blinding. It was soft, quiet, a luminous silver white, shimmering like stardust. I didn't feel pulled toward it by force. It was more like my soul was remembering how to move, drawn to it by its longing. And I floated, light as mist. But the truth is, I wasn't moving toward the light. The light was unfolding within me, as if I had always been part of it and had simply forgotten. And when that light completely embraced me, I began to see them. 3 beings, vast, towering, without distinct faces, yet full of sacred presence. They didn't stand where they were, like 3 columns of light, immense and translucent, moving slowly in a kind of symphony made of form and flow. And even though they had no eyes, I knew they were seeing me. Though they had no mouths, I could hear them. And though they spoke no language, I understood every word clearly, deeply, as if the meaning was being transferred straight into my essence. One of them moved closer, or rather, their energy merged gently into mine. And I heard, "Welcome back." I didn't remember ever being here, and yet, somehow, it felt familiar. So familiar, it shook me. I wasn't trembling from fear or cold. I was trembling because I was beginning to feel the truth. I wasn't a 27-year-old girl who had just died in Montana. I was a soul, an ancient being, a fragment of something far greater than any word I had ever known. Another being spoke, not with sound, but with light-formed thought. "You have learned much, but one very important lesson is still missing." I asked, in my mind, "What lesson?" They didn't answer directly. Instead, a stream of light unfolded before me, flowing like a living film. But it wasn't a movie of the life I had just lived. It was something far older. I began to see images strange yet familiar, languages I had never learned, but somehow understood, faces I had never met, yet loved as if they were part of me. I saw past lives. I saw myself as someone else, living somewhere else, loving someone, failing, running. I saw pieces of my soul scattered across lifetimes, still lingering in places I had once walked through. And then the first being said, "Do you wish to remember them? You asked to see this before you entered this life. Now is the time." I didn't know what I was about to see, but deep within, my soul already knew. What I was about to witness would change the entire reason I had come into this life. Have you ever wondered if you've lived before? Whether the pain you carry in this life might be an echo of old wounds still waiting to be healed? When that being extended a hand, or more precisely, extended a stream of pure intention toward me, everything around us opened like invisible gates. There was no more light, no more me, no more of the 3 beings. Only scene after scene unfolding, like dreams I had never dreamed, yet remembered in perfect detail. The first past life appeared. I saw myself as a man, bearded, dressed in heavy furs, living in a land buried in snow year-round. I was a hunter. But I didn't hunt just to survive. I killed for pride, for glory, to prove I was stronger than nature itself. I laid traps across the forest. I killed animals nursing their young, and I felt nothing, not even a flicker of remorse. Until the day I found a wolf caught in one of my snares. It looked at me, not with hatred, not with fear, but with a gaze so deep it felt as if it already knew I would pay, not in blood, but in loneliness. And as that vision faded, I realized I had seen those eyes before. They were Maple's eyes, the fox I had rescued in Montana. One of the beings spoke. That life taught you that power does not equal understanding. You were strong, but you did not understand what you destroyed. Then the second vision appeared. I was a young woman living during the Great Depression in America. I had a child. I was poor, jobless, alone, no husband, no hope. I carried my baby to the door of a convent and left it there, praying it would have a better chance at life. I ran away. I never looked back. But for the rest of that life, I could never sleep through the night. I heard crying. I felt empty arms. I worked in a factory. I remarried. I had more children. But I never forgave myself. And that child, though I couldn't be sure, I knew in my soul. That child's spirit is now my mother in this life. One of the beings spoke again. The compassion you feel today is the pain you never fully embraced yesterday. The soul does not punish, it only wants to heal. Then the third vision unfolded. I was an older man living in medieval Europe, a priest. I taught about love, about faith, about sacrifice. I spoke of redemption, but I never truly lived it because I loved someone and never dared to admit it. I spent a lifetime devoted to form, but disconnected from my own heart. I died alone in a cold stone chapel, carrying a sorrow I had never given a name. And I began to see. I had once been unfeeling. I had once been abandoned. I had once hidden from myself. All of it was me. And because of that, I had asked to return, to learn how to love without wounding, to give without walking away, to live honestly with what I felt without the need to wear a mask. I asked the beings, why do I have to see all of this? Why would a soul choose to come back knowing it might hurt all over again? And they answered with a silence that held more truth than words ever could. Because no lesson is ever truly precious unless it is chosen. And I understood. No one was forcing me. There was no hand of judgment, just the echo of what had been left unfinished, not to repay, but to complete. I looked back on my life, Evelyn, the girl from Montana, and I saw it with new eyes. Everyone who had hurt me, who had left me, who hadn't understood me, they hadn't come to destroy me. They had come to touch the very wounds my soul had chosen to heal. Every pain I carried was a signal that I was on the right path. And I began to cry, not from sadness, but because for the first time I truly understood myself. I wasn't a victim. I was a student, and life was the sacred school of the soul. But then they asked me something that brought my soul to complete stillness, a single question that shook everything I thought I had come to learn. Do you want to know what's waiting for you next? As the past life scenes began to fade, I was no longer standing in the light. I felt myself drifting in a space that was neither light nor dark, neither warm nor cold. It was neutral, still. I was no longer watching memories play out like a film. I was beginning to feel each of those lives as if they were happening now. That was the hardest part, and also the most beautiful. I felt myself shudder, as if my own hands were the ones killing that wolf. I could feel the fear in its eyes, the kind of fear that doesn't end with one life, but echoes across many. And then I felt the young mother's heart, how it trembled and tightened as she turned away from the steps of the convent, leaving behind the fragile cries of her child. Her hands were shaking, not from the cold, but because a part of her soul was being left behind that door. I began to understand. No action is ever truly separate. No life is one-dimensional. Every choice we make, whether to love, to abandon, to hate, to sacrifice, leaves an imprint on the soul. And those imprints don't disappear. They return, not to punish us, but to give us another chance. A chance to choose again, this time with a wider heart. And I cried out in thought, how am I supposed to live with all this pain? If I've done such terrible things, do I even deserve the light you're showing me? One of the beings answered, gently, pouring the response straight into my being. It is because you once forgot the light that you now understand how deeply it matters. And I realized then I was not the sum of my mistakes. I was a soul in the process of becoming, and that growth required the darker chapters, not to make me less, but so that when I finally chose the good, I would know deep in my being why it was beautiful. And then something unexpected happened. I found myself standing before all the versions of me from every lifetime I had lived, each with a different form, a different gender, a different color, a different face. They looked at me, not with judgment, not with shame, but as if they had been waiting for me to arrive. One version of me, the young mother, stepped forward and gently placed her hand over my heart. In another version, the aging priest rested his hand on my shoulder. And the hunter from long ago knelt before me and whispered into my consciousness a quiet apology. In that moment, I cried. And I, Evelyn, embraced them all. For the first time across all my lifetimes, I didn't reject any part of who I had been. I forgave. And I became whole. No longer the fragmented me from separate lives, but the full, unified soul that I truly was. And in that instant, something opened again. A new doorway, an arch of light unlike any I had seen before. It wasn't the healing light I had first entered. It was the light of choice.
You have remembered. Now it is time to choose. The past has been seen, but the future is still waiting to be created. Have you ever imagined if you could choose your life again from beginning to end, what would you choose? A different body? A different memory? Or would you return as yourself, just as you are, but this time live with a heart that is fully awake? I didn't know how far I had traveled. The three beings were gone. The whispers had faded. There was only me, alone. And before me was a river, but not a river as you might imagine. There was no water, no banks. It was a vast, shimmering ocean woven from pure light, moving endlessly like a living galaxy that breathed. Instantly, I understood. This was the river of time. Each current, a stream of reality. Each swirl, a lifetime unfolding. And they were all happening simultaneously, past, present, future, no longer in the linear sequence we know on Earth, but like a living tapestry where everything exists at once. No beginning, no end. I stood before that river, not swept away, but invited. Then a voice, not coming from anywhere, yet echoing through the whole of me, spoke gently. You have witnessed what has been. Now is the time to choose what has not yet come. I looked into the river, and instantly a stream of light rose like a bubble of memory. Inside, I saw myself, not Evelyn, but a dark-skinned child born into poverty in India. Yet in those young eyes was the depth of a sage. I watched that life. It was brief, but filled with compassion, a heart that loved quietly without ever being known. Before I could linger, another light surfaced. I saw myself as a man in the distant future, an era where machines were integrated into the human body. I was an engineer, programming artificial emotions for robots. Yet deep inside, I felt an aching loneliness. In that world, no one dared feel pain, and because of that, no one truly knew how to love. I trembled. Each life was a lesson, a choice. Not one better than the other, only what matched what the soul was ready to learn next. So I asked, can I return to the life I just left to be Evelyn again? And the voice answered, yes, but you must understand, if you return, you will not be the same Evelyn. You will carry this memory as intuition, not as knowledge. You will forget, but your heart will remember. I stood in silence.
Then the river rippled again. But this time, it didn't show distant lifetimes or strange faces. It showed the ones I loved. My mother, sitting alone in the hospital room, clutching my hand even though I was unresponsive. Elijah, my blind dog, barking furiously at the door, as if he could sense something beyond the veil. And then I saw something I had never seen before. A little boy, maybe 4 years old, with messy hair, playing with the wooden foxes I used to carve. That child was my son, my future son. I gasped, I have a child? The voice didn't answer. It didn't need to. I knew. That future was one of the possibilities if I returned, if I chose to live. I started to tremble, not from fear, but because I felt something I had never dared to believe before. I mattered, not just because of what I'd done, but because my presence alone had the power to shape someone else's story. I thought of my mother, of the animals I hadn't yet saved, of the little boy not yet born. And I understood I wasn't choosing to return because I feared death. I was choosing to return because I finally understood what it meant to live. I turned toward the light and whispered, I'm ready. Take me back. But this time, I want to remember. And the final voice replied in a breath that lit every part of my awareness like fire. Then live. But this time, live with your soul as the guide. I chose to return. But what I wasn't prepared for was the shock of waking up in the same body, in a world where no one believed I had died, and no one could understand what I had seen on the other side. I didn't know how long I had traveled between the worlds, but the moment I returned, I knew exactly when it happened. It wasn't peaceful. It wasn't gentle. It was like being jolted by lightning, tearing through every nerve ending in my body. I gasped violently, not because I wanted to breathe, but because my body had been yanked back upright, as if my soul had fallen straight from heaven into a broken shell. Machines screamed. The hospital lights burned my eyes. Someone shouted, "She's awake!" My mother collapsed onto the bed, her hands trembling as she clutched my fingers, crying without making a sound. I tried to speak, but my throat was scorched dry, like I had wandered through a desert for centuries. I looked around at doctors, nurses, and machines. My arm was bandaged. IV tubes ran into my skin. And that was the exact moment I realized something far more painful than death itself. No one understood where I had just returned from. They said I was lucky. They said I'd been in a coma for 3 days after being rescued from the ravine. They said my body had suffered severe hypothermia, but miraculously, my organs remained stable. They said many things, but no one asked, what did you see while suspended between life and death? I didn't blame them. How could they know to ask? Only my mother,
after the room had gone still, leaned in close and whispered in my ear, "Did you dream?" I looked at her, my eyes full of tears. I nodded, but it wasn't a dream. From that day on, I lived as someone different in the same body. Everything that once felt familiar now seemed distant. I no longer saw the world the same way. I didn't just look at trees, I heard them whisper. I didn't just touch animals, I felt their fear, their pain, and even their memories staring back through their eyes. I didn't just see people, I saw the wounds they carried that no one else could see. But I couldn't speak about it. Not because I feared people would think I was crazy, but there were no words big enough to hold what I had experienced. I thought coming back would be the end of the journey, but it turned out to be the beginning of a kind of loneliness no one ever warns you about. Every morning, I opened my eyes in that cold hospital room. But something strange began to happen. I saw everything through a thin layer of light, like mist, like spirit. The ceiling, the walls, the nurse's face, the glass of water. Everything had a soul. Not in a poetic sense, but truly. I could feel the energy humming behind every object. When I touched a spoon, I could almost hear the metal whispering, "I was once stone, once ore, once the earth itself." Whenever someone entered the room, I didn't just hear their footsteps. I could sense the fatigue, the worry, the quiet hope they carried, like a wordless melody only I could hear. I thought I might be going crazy, but I wasn't. I was waking up. And the most heartbreaking part was that no one around me knew that inside me, a whole universe was being born. You don't know what loneliness is until you begin to see things too deeply, too clearly, too delicately, and there's no one you can share it with. You don't know what exhaustion feels like until you have to pretend you're still the same person, even though your soul has already stepped into a different dimension. I couldn't return to small talk. Hollow words made my ears ache. Polite hugs left me cold. Superficial laughter made me feel like a ghost lost in a crowded party. Even my mother, one person who believed me, couldn't follow me that far. She asked questions, she cared, she loved, but there was fear in her eyes. She knew I wasn't the same, but she didn't know who this new me had become. One evening, I walked out to the back of the hospital and sat quietly under the stars. The sky was blanketed with light. The silence was so deep I could hear the blood flowing through my veins. And then I began to hear prayers not my own, but from others in the hospital. Broken souls quietly crying out, "Dear God, dear anyone, please save me." I collapsed, not out of fear, but because my heart no longer had walls. I understood then. When your soul has been opened, you don't just live your own life anymore. You begin to live with the pain that the world doesn't dare to speak. I was no longer Evelyn, who lived for herself. I had become a fragment of light, sent back to this world to remember for those who had forgotten who they are, to love for those who had shut their hearts in fear, to cry for the dreams that were buried too soon. And then something strange began to happen. I started attracting unfamiliar glances. An elderly woman in the room next door would look at me and smile, as if she recognized the light in me. A little boy with cancer once grabbed my hand and asked, "Are you an angel?" A young nurse, eyes wet with tears, whispered, "When I'm near you, I'm not afraid of dying." I hadn't told them anything, but my soul had. Not through words, but through the field of energy I carried. And for the first time since I came back, I didn't feel entirely alone. But the strangest part was this. I began to remember things that had never happened. I remembered the eyes of a child I never gave birth to. I remembered the warm scent of wood from a home I never lived in. I remembered a dirt path somewhere in Africa where I once walked barefoot in another life. And I began to write. Not because I wanted to tell a story, but because I couldn't not write. It was as if my soul needed to record itself to keep the fragments of memory from slipping away as I continued living in this temporary world. My mother was the only one who believed me. She didn't need proof. She didn't need explanations. One afternoon, while I sat staring out the hospital window, she placed a piece of paper in my hand. She said, "If you went somewhere, and if you brought back a message, let it live." And I understood. I didn't come back just to survive. I came back to live fully, and to carry the light I had seen, whether or not anyone believed me. What I didn't expect was that I wasn't the only one who had returned, and a soul I had never met was about to step into my life, carrying the final piece of a message I had started writing lifetimes ago. I was still in the hospital. The days after I woke up passed in silence, as if time itself didn't want to interrupt something sacred that was beginning to take root. I wrote, I watched, I listened, I felt. Every moment carried a strange kind of grace, and yet something still felt incomplete, like a beautiful melody missing its final note. I didn't know what it was until one rainy afternoon. The door to my room opened. A man stepped inside, his hair messy, his eyes deep and sorrowful. He was an art therapy volunteer, visiting patients to talk about how painting could help with healing. His name was Caleb Monroe. But what took my breath away wasn't his name, it was his eyes. I had seen those eyes before, not here, but in the light, among the many soul versions of myself. He was one of them. I couldn't recall every detail, but my heart remembered. The moment he sat beside me and asked, "Do you believe in meetings that were arranged before we were even born?" I froze, not because the question was too philosophical, but because it was the very question I had asked the beings of light when I stood before the river of time. We started talking about dreams, about light, about life after death. And without hesitation, he told me he had once died too, in a car crash when he was 19. His heart had stopped for 3 minutes. In that experience, he didn't see God. He didn't even see himself. He only saw a white mist covering a field, where a voice told him, "One day, you will meet the one who carries the rest of the message." He had been waiting, searching, painting, hundreds of pieces, like silent messages cast out to a soul he didn't know by name. And now, upon meeting me, he wasn't certain, but he felt it. Maybe it's you. We began seeing each other every day, not to fall in love, but to remember. One night, I handed him the pages I had written after I awoke from my near-death experience. He went quiet, then slowly unzipped his backpack and pulled out an old painting. When I looked at it, I forgot how to breathe. It was the very gateway of light I had walked through, each color, each shimmer, each movement exactly as if he had stood there beside me. There was no doubt anymore. He was living proof of what I had brought back, not through knowledge, but through soul frequency. From that point on, we began rewriting everything. Not as a religious book, but as a gentle reminder for hearts that had lost their way. That you never truly die. That you are never truly alone. That every pain you've endured carries within it a deep lesson, one your soul once chose willingly. And that you can always choose again, not just after death, but in the middle of life, the moment you stop running and start listening to your heart. We didn't date. We didn't call each other soulmates. We made no promises. But every time my eyes met his, I felt like I was seeing a part of myself I had once lost across lifetimes. Caleb wasn't like anyone I'd ever met, not because he was brilliant or wise, but because he didn't pretend to be only human. He lived as though half of him still stood in the light. He didn't chase time. He didn't feel the need to explain. He listened to silence, and he loved being wholly present. One day, I asked him, "Do you remember any of your past lives?" He looked at me and smiled, as if he had known I would ask. Not clearly, But there's a dream I've had since I was a child. In it, a girl and I are saying goodbye by a river of light. She's crying, and I tell her, we'll meet again, but next time you'll be the one carrying the message. I didn't say anything. I simply took his hand and held it tight. And in that moment, something deep within my soul stirred and spoke. That dream, it's what brought me back. From then on, we began doing something that, until now, I had done alone, recording the testimonies of those who had died and returned. The first emails came from all over the world. A man in Peru who had drowned at age 11 described dissolving into the light like a drop of water returning to its mother ocean. An elderly woman in Norway shared that she had seen her late husband waiting for her in a radiant garden where time didn't exist. An 8-year-old girl in Japan said she flew through a rainbow gate and heard God ask her, "Would you like to go back? To be a friend to those who are afraid of the dark?" None of them knew one another, but every story pulsed with the same frequency. Not identical in imagery, but united in something deeper. Unconditional love, profound truth, and a knowing that we are never truly separate.
Caleb and I began to see it. There was a soul network awakening, a kind of shared memory carried by those who had brushed against death and now found each other through waves, through words, through glances, and through vibrations that needed no language. One night, sitting together by a small fireplace at the healing center where Caleb painted and I wrote, he placed his hand over my heart and said, "Do you feel it? Those who have returned, they're like lantern carriers. They're not here to prove anything. They're here to shine in silence." And I understood. We didn't need to start a movement. We didn't need to preach. Truth doesn't need to be shouted. It only needs to be present. From that day forward, I changed how I wrote. I stopped trying to explain. I simply told the stories with all the honesty my heart could give. I didn't write to convince anyone. I wrote so that maybe, somewhere, someone might whisper to themselves, "I'm not crazy. I remembered right." And that's when I began to understand something even deeper. Those of us marked by NDEs, we didn't return to become saints. We returned to live authentically. Not to live perfectly, but to live truthfully. Not to escape life, but to bring the light from beyond death into this life, right here, right now. And if you're still reading, if something inside you stirred, if you've ever had a dream you were too afraid to share because someone might laugh, please know this: you are not alone. Maybe you've never died, but your soul is remembering, and that is the beginning of all things sacred. If this story touched something in you, I invite you to share your own story in the comments. It doesn't need to make sense. It doesn't need to be perfect. It only needs to be real. Because maybe, just maybe, the light inside you is the reminder another soul has been waiting for.